5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are now live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to episode 2 of the Government Coins podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you today. My name is Shieh Kegler. I am one of the hosts of the podcast, and here's my co-host right here.
Yes, my name is SBIR, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm looking awesome to interviewing with Jennifer.
Yeah, so we have with us today Jennifer Shieh from the SBA. She is over the Office of Innovation, and she's here to talk more with us about the SBIR and STTR programs. But before we get into this, Jennifer, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm really excited. I will say I particularly enjoyed season 1 episode with Hamza. So I think that was, it was really great to get to be in conversation with you. So I'm Jennifer Shieh, as Shieh mentioned. I'm the Chief Scientist and Program Manager for the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, which, you know, government acronyms, SBIR and STTR. We actually prefer to call it America's Seed Fund because really, you know, it's America's Seed Fund. And I know we're going to dive way more deep into that. So how did I get here? So I guess I could start with, my background is probably not one that you would expect to find necessarily at the U.S. Small Business Administration. My PhD is in neuroscience. So I spent 7 yekind of getting to that point. I think really I got into science because I really wanted to have a big positive impact on the world. And I felt like, you know, this was a way to do that. If you go and study and do research, if you study science, you can do things like make cures that will help people. And so that ultimately wasn't what ended up happening when I went into studying, you know, brain cells in a dish, looking under a microscope. But it did lead me to learn about science policy. So that's how I got into the government. I did a science policy fellowship at the National Academy of Sciences, which gives a lot of advice to the federal government. It's a nonprofit organization, but they give advice to the government about how to use science within their policies, within programs and decision-making, but also they make a lot of recommendations and studies around how the policies that the federal government has impacts kind of the business of science itself. So, you know, where you can put funding or what are the next, you know, future technology areas to be thinking about, or how can we mitigate climate change, you know, so all of these things. And that kind of exposed me. So at the time, actually, after my PhD, I was working for a startup, and somebody came in as a business or as part of a career panel for this science policy fellowship. They talked about the SBIR program. And I was like, oh, we should totally apply to this. I had no idea that the federal government gives money to startups. And I will say I was in the Bay Area and, you know, the heart of Silicon Valley, and all I ever heard about was venture capital funding and angel funding. I had never heard about, you know, this SBIR, STTR, or even doing business with the government, right? And so instead, though, of applying for a grant, because I was in the medical space, and instead of applying for the grant, I applied to actually work in the federal government through a science policy fellowship. So the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, they publish Science magazine, but they also support this program that brings 200 PhD scientists and engineers to work in the government for a year or two. And that's how I ended up actually at the National Cancer Institute in their SBIR Development Center. And that was a life-changing experience. It's definitely better to be on the money side as opposed to be the person applying for funding. But, and Shieh, I know you were in the government as well. And when you first get into it, you don't realize like how much people that work within the government care about being good stewards of the money, and how much time and effort goes into looking at and evaluating all the proposals and making sure that the topics that get put out there are clear and understandable. And so I definitely, fell in love with government service and the SBIR program. And so I was with the National Institutes of Health. After my fellowship, they hired me. And so I was at the National Cancer Institute and then the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. So I worked in the biomedical product development space. And about 5 years ago, I joined the Small Business Administration. And I'm sure I can talk a lot about government structure and how complicated it is, but I love this program, and I love the mission of SBA in helping entrepreneurs, innovators, make sure, small businesses can start, grow, expand, recover. So.
Yeah, you're on mute, Hamza.
There's an application process. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, so this is the interesting thing. Yeah, so I mentioned, we didn't actually, the startup I worked for didn't apply, but one of the things that's interesting, and maybe I'm going to start with just high level what the SBIR and STTR programs are, and why we call it America's Seed Fund, right? So essentially, this is non-dilutive capital. This is funding through grants or contracts that comes from federal agencies to fund small businesses that are doing research and development, and that has the potential for commercialization. And so this is about $4 billion a year, because it's a portion of each of the agency's research and development budgets. And that means about 4,000 companies get funded each year through this program. But there is an application process. And so, there are 11 different federal departments that actually fund these SBIR and STTR awards. And I will say SBA is not one of them. So we do not have the money. And then part of that actually, I would say it's a benefit, or I will frame it as a benefit, that all of the agencies actually have their own kind of application process. And so the reason I frame it as a benefit is because that means, if you're already familiar with a particular agency and the way that they do business, the way that they do their research and development awards, whether it's through grants or through contracts, the process itself is going to be very similar. So, and I'll take the example of National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, Department of Energy. These are all granting agencies. And so the way they operate their small business SBIR, STTR programs is also through the grant process. So you would apply through grants.gov. They have also their own systems. Sometimes you need to be registered. And then if you were applying to NASA or the Department of Defense, they have their own application systems. But it's essentially what you do is you look for the solicitations or the topics that those agencies have put out there, and you respond to it. And there's a lot of variety, which again, it can make it complex, but also it means that there's a lot of potential for you to figure out. I really liked your episode of Government Coins. I like the find your niche and get rich.
Yes. So how do you determine which agencies are working with innovative companies as a part of the SBIR program?
Yeah, so I would be remiss in my job if I didn't tell you to go to a government website, SBIR.gov. And so on SBIR.gov, it provides a lot of information. And I will say we are in the process of making it much easier to navigate. and also feel free to jump in at any time, but the agencies by law, because this is congressionally, each of these agencies is required to reserve a portion of their research and development budget to go to small businesses. So you are only competing for this money against other small businesses. And so basically any federal agency that has more than $100 million in their R&D budget that goes out of the agency, they have to reserve 3.2% of it. And so then that's for the Small Business Innovation Research Program. For the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, an agency that has over $1 billion in their R&D budget has to reserve 0.45%. And a lot of times I say SBIR, and I kind of mean both SBIR and STTR, because they're run very similarly. The key difference is really
That's my question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that was my question. What is the difference between SBIR and STTR?
Yeah, the key difference is really just STTR requires that you as a small business have to partner with a nonprofit research institution. Now, the thing is with SBIR, because of the stage of technology development and R&D, a lot of times those small businesses are already partnering with a nonprofit research institution, but it's just not a requirement the way it is for STTR.
That makes sense.
You know, WA actually started out as like in the startup space, a tech startup. So when you were speaking about, being in the heart of Silicon Valley and only hearing about venture capital, I immediately start having flashbacks. Like I was, because I remember getting into the space and even having prior knowledge of, government contracting opportunities, thinking about a program like SBIR, the America's Seed Fund, thinking about a program like that to exist to help startups, it seemed unrealistic. So that's when we start doing a little more research into how the process works. And I did notice, that a lot of the agencies had different programs in place. So, some of them had pitch competitions and some of them actually went through an application process. So I thought it was really cool. I actually dropped the link of all of the participating agencies into on the YouTube channel. But I wanted to ask a question about I guess the differences in applying for these programs versus submitting an unsolicited proposal.
That is a great question because, and it really depends a lot on the agency. So number one, for anything related to this program, there has to be a solicitation that you're responding to. So it is kind of solicited in that sense. There is a funding opportunity notice. Now, the thing is that the agencies, though, how defined that solicitation specifies what it is they're looking for is very different. And I'm going to describe it in kind of two major buckets. So what I'd say is, with this program, it's really, one of the goals is about commercialization and getting onto the marketplace more broadly. And so there are a number of agencies where they are more market driven, like they're not going to be your customer actually. And so an agency like NIH, the National Institutes of Health, or USDA, National Science Foundation, ultimately, they're not going to be the customer that you're selling to after this program ends, but they want to help your company, your idea, get to the point where private investors can invest or that you can just go ahead and get it out in the market already. And so they're, maybe it's like kind of market-driven agencies. They tend to be the granting agencies because that's a lot of times how grants work. But what they'll do is kind of tell you high level, we're interested in these topics. We're interested in cancer therapeutics. We're interested in AI-based solutions for new algorithms. And so that's kind of like at that level. And I will say even the National Science Foundation is so broad that they have a topic called other. So if you have something that doesn't fit in one of their categories that they say, if it's high risk, high reward R&D, and it's you know, there's a market demand for it, they will consider it and fund it. And I contrast that with probably your you know, more what people are used to in the government contracting realm, right? Which is mission driven, where it's really about the agency, what they're looking for. And so the Department of Defense, NASA, you know, Department of Homeland Security, they probably will be your customer, but they don't necessarily want to be your only customer. And so even those topics, they may be more specific, but they're still pretty broad. Like they're open to a lot of different potential ways. And so these topics in the solicitations tend to be pretty high level descriptions. You know, we want vertical lift drones. I'm so far away from the technology now, I can't even like give good examples.
I would add, so just as a piggyback off of that question. So because the focus is to help these companies or these products develop to become like commercial products, does the government make money on the back end of the, like after the development? How does that work? So that way we know for sure what we're getting into.
Yeah, no, and this is one of the things that's particularly unique about this program. When I said this is $4 billion of non-dilutive capital, this is investment in your companies, in you. The government takes no equity, and the IP actually is protected through under the Bayh-Dole Act. So this is research and development funding, and so what that means is you retain ownership over your intellectual property. The government does retain some, you know, licensing rights and government use rights, but ultimately, this is your intellectual property. You own it. The government doesn't take any equity, so we also don't get the, you know, company return necessarily. But I think the idea is really we're trying to get you out into the economy broadly, and hopefully you pay taxes.
Definitely is going to pay taxes.
Job opportunities as well.
No, that's a good point. Him just said create job opportunities. I cut him off talking about some taxes. So, you know, it's almost tax season. Everybody, you know, already had that top of mind.
So if a company has an innovative idea but doesn't have all of the support and detail or human resources, equipment, or what it takes to build that solution, but has a solid proposal and structure of how they're going to execute and solve that problem or that solution in a technology way, does this program support funding for us getting all of the resources, tools needed to actually produce that solution?
It's a good question. I would like break it up into a couple different pieces actually, because so maybe I'll also describe, I realized I didn't even talk about sort of the structure of the program. So even though each of the agencies runs and funds and manages their own program, you know, part of the reason SBA is involved in this is that we set policy that cuts across all the agencies. And one of those is the structure and the competitive nature of this program. So there are 3 phases that we typically talk about. Phase 1, which is the proof of concept, and it's about $50,000 to $250,000 and 6 months to a year's worth of work. And so this gets to kind of one of your questions, right? Which is, so if you're at that proof of concept stage, you don't have a product, then yes, that's funding to help you get to like maybe a prototype, and to actually use that funding to have people on board who can help you get there. So you can fund people to work on the R&D, Now it is a competitive process. So you have to submit to these solicitations. They typically come out on a very specific schedule. And so because of that competitive nature, depending on who else is competing, you might not get it if you don't already have some of those connections and partnerships, at least to say that, like, if we were to get this award, we could bring on this person who has the right technical expertise. So that's kind of phase one. And then after phase one, you apply to a phase two. And so phase two is more fleshing out of the R&D and technical development. And that's typically up to 2 years of work and up to $1.7 million. And I would say, particularly for the audience of people who are interested in the government as a customer, getting either a phase one or a phase two, and that's this protected SBIR STTR pool of money, right? That $4 billion a year that only goes to small businesses. That makes you eligible. If you won one of those awards, it makes you eligible for phase three. And phase three that's unlocking the $665 billion of the federal contracting marketplace, because this lets you do sole source awards based on that technology that you developed in phase one and two.
Okay.
That's a good point. So you literally develop this solution. They give you the money to create it, and then you go back and sell it to the agencies again. So going from phase one to phase two, and then phase three is just that, basically that gap. So it's not necessarily you have to go in order. Okay, because I was confused about that initially.
Yeah, because phase three, you can have phase three like after a phase one. You could have a phase, if you find a customer in the government and you had a phase one SBIR award, and they want to, because they can also use, basically phase three means you're getting non-SBIR dollars. So if they want to fund you for more R&D to make it specifically tailored to what they're doing, that's also something you can get, considered phase three dollars for further research and development.
So I guess in a nutshell, it does allow the ability to support your actual solution from a standpoint of, okay, let's build it out to phase two out of phase one, but we're going to need this amount of capital or amount of funding so we can hire these resources and hire these professionals to be able to outsee everything. Okay, got you. That's awesome. So the government pretty much, will just support your pretty much a naked idea until it comes to, reality.
It can't. Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, it is, so there are different reasons for it, right? Like whether it's how are you attacking this problem in human health? Like that's the mission of the NIH, is improving human health. So what is it that you have an idea about creating this? Now, all of these things do go through a review process. So it is a competitive reviewed process. Many of the agencies bring in kind of external reviewers, like people in the field, so they should be technical experts. And one of the positive things about that means if you get an award, then that's a positive signal to other, non-federal investors, to private investors, that, hey, you've gone through this rigorous due diligence process already, and they believe that your technology has promise.
That's what's up. That's awesome.
I know a few startups who actually participated in the SBIR program. So this was literally a no-brainer of a conversation, because it directly correlates with the conversations that we've been having about small businesses. So, ultimately, we all have to start somewhere. So if you have a small business and then you come up with an idea that's more innovative, that's something a step above the work that you're doing, now this is still an opportunity for you to work with the government to develop this new solution, because with the experience you've learned, you've gained some new perspective. So I think that's a really good point to also talk about. Then this is be my final question, and then I'll go ahead to check and see if we have questions from the audience. But in terms of businesses who are like Hamza said, basically brand new and looking to get started with this? Or what about a startup who has a solution that's something innovative and it can be commercialized? They have proof of concept already by actually having it in the marketplace. Is that a solution that you would still take on even if, you know, it's already being produced in the marketplace? It's not like completely innovative. Well, it's innovative, it's a new solution, but it's already being utilized. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And you know, it does, again, it comes down to like, it's valuable that the agencies have all these, there's so many different entry points in a sense to the program, because you know, ultimately it's up to each agency to figure out how they want to make use of small businesses to meet their overarching mission. And so, and the portfolio, again, since it's $4 billion, it's large enough to have a mixture. So there are a lot of the agencies who think about, you know, we just want to start from like ideas and see them fleshed out all the way through. But there are also a number of agencies, and I'd say it's likely a little bit more, so I can give maybe two concrete examples of where an agency like Department of Defense, for example, would be interested in something that's already been developed and is in the marketplace already, but it's not being used to help the warfighter. Right. And there are going to be specific requirements around that needs to be tailored. And it's good. There is going to be some R&D around it to make sure that it actually can work within the defense environment. And so, you know, there are certain things called commercial solution offerings, right? And so some agencies within DoD use that mechanism for SBIR as well. And then on the case of NIH and biomedical product development, there are a lot of unmet medical needs and populations that aren't being served. And so maybe there's a product that exists, or even a drug that could be reused for a different purpose, but then that's still going to need research to make sure it actually will work for this other population or for this other indication. And then the US Department of Agriculture, USDA, actually has a topic that's around making sure that there are certain technologies are developed to help rural communities. So maybe it's being used, but it's not tailored for an environment in a rural area.
And we just got a quick question about the program. And I know earlier you spoke about this program being strictly for small businesses, but someone was asking, can they partner with a large company to also go after this? Or is it strictly for small business?
Yeah, so, you know, I guess we didn't really talk about like, what does it mean to be a small business for this program?
Right.
Because actually, you know, a small business, so this program specifically doesn't exactly, you know, follow the SBA size standards, because
I was wondering, 100 employees.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering because the SBA says 100 employees. That's it.
Well, okay, so the SBIR STTR program, eligibility is small does mean 500 employees or smaller. I will tell you though, that I think it's about 80% to 90% of the companies that get awards are less than 20. I think it's 80% are like less than 5 employees. So, I mean, this is, you know, you don't have to be a large established company to take part. And in fact, I think that can harm you more than it can help you in this kind of program. But the other requirements, you know, you have to be a for-profit organization located in the US. And then ownership has to be majority US citizen, or I'm blanking on the term now, permanent resident alien. You have to be legally in the US. So that's, you know, so in terms of partnering, you can, there are kind of specifics around like how much could you subcontract out? So, I mean, you are going to, if it's a contract, you're going to be the prime as a small business. And you could subcontract out some portion, but there is a limit. The small business has to do the R&D work for at least 2/3 of it in the phase 1 and at least 50% in phase 2.
Okay. So I have a question. So you said that this program is spends about $4 billion or is allocated $4 billion towards small businesses a year. How much of that $4 billion gets absorbed every year?
Oh, all of it. I mean, that's about how much is spent on because the requirement for each of those agencies, they have to reserve a portion to go to small businesses, and it has to go almost exclusively to awards for the small businesses.
Got you. Okay. So actually it could be more than $4 billion.
It could be. Yeah, that is a minimum that is required.
Okay. Minimum.
And we are getting ready to wrap up, but I wanted to, just share more info. We'll see if you can share more information about sorry, my neighbor started cutting grass as soon as I hopped on the podcast. I wanted to see if you could share more information about your role at SBA and some of the exciting news that's coming out through America's Seed Fund.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because, so how SBA plays a role. I mean, we, as I mentioned, we actually write and the policies and report for the federal agencies across this program. But, I really see us as we try to help the federal agencies meet their mission and figure out ways that this program can help them meet their mission through small businesses. But the other thing that we really do and focus on is making sure that we're building this innovation ecosystem, that we're helping provide the resources and that are going to be out in the field to help small businesses, right? We want to be the friendly face where like, okay, you don't have to navigate all 11 federal agencies. Like, how do you figure out which door you should enter? And so through that, we work through our resource partners. And in particular, there's a program called the Federal and State Technology Partnership Program, or FAST, that our office funds. And these are resource partners that help people specifically navigate the SBIR and STTR realm. And so, you're talking about partners, you can go to a FAST organization, which are often universities or small business development centers, and they'll probably know some technical experts they can connect you to. And then the other thing is trying to serve that front door. So I was mentioning some of these exciting things that are coming up. Well, July 22nd is SBIR's 40th birthday. we came into existence. The law was signed July 22nd, 1982. And so kind of for that, we're actually trying to think very hard about how do we become, as America's Seed Fund, how do we become more reflective of America? And how do we make this government information kind of easier to digest and understand for people who are new, for the startups, the innovative startups, the entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter where in the country you're from or what your background is, race, ethnicity, gender. We want all of the ideas.
Oh, that's a really good point. And I had something else, and then my neighbor came back over here and got on my nerves again. It came back to me. So right now there are, you said 11 participating agencies. Will there be an increase of these agencies soon, or how does that process work as well? What if there's an agency that you want to work with, but they're not a part of the program? Is there any way, like, how does that process work?
Oh, this actually kicks off a really good point. So these are the 11 federal agencies that fund that reserved portion. And so, it's based on the research and development budget. So it's typically the science funding agencies. But the key thing is that phase 3 sole source opportunity, that's every agency. So even if you are funded by the National Science Foundation for some amazing new software program, you could sell it to Treasury, even though they don't have an R&D budget that goes towards SBIR. And through this SBIR phase 3, you could sell it to, Census is not a good example because they do a lot of R&D, but there are agencies, that don't do research and development that you can sell your product to through this phase 3 SBIR mechanism.
That's interesting.
Yeah, definitely a good point. I think that is it for us today, though. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing some information. I tell you, as soon as we start talking about it on like social media, people were like, wait, the government's giving out free money? So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed this, and I'm glad that you exist to share this information to help people not be afraid of government funding.
Absolutely. I appreciate having you too. You share a lot of valuable information. I took a lot of nuggets from it too as well.
Excellent.
And we'll definitely contact us as well if you have any updates or anything that we should share with our communities as well. We want to make sure that we are a space where the line of communication can run, if that makes sense. Like if there's something going on, people are excited about it and can have the conversation. That's why we try to focus on making sure we have a comfortable, laid back podcast, because it's hard going to events sometimes and the information is just here. So I wanted to say thank you for that. You shared so much information in such a short amount of time. Thank you, Jennifer. And we will definitely be reaching out to get you back on the podcast again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank y'all so much for showing up. We had a really good, consistent number today of people who were live, just here watching. So I want to say thank y'all. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast. If y'all have anything y'all want to add, anything you want us to relate to Jennifer, drop it in the comment section and we will definitely reach out to them. Until next time, we'll see y'all. This has been episode 2 of the Government Coins podcast.
Awesome. Peace out.
Thank you.
Peace. For y'all. Woo! There we go.
Thank you.
That was great. That was very informative.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I'm trying to take notes and I'm trying to listen. I just stopped at one point. I couldn't do it no more.
I was multitasking. I'm writing notes down, key points, bullet points. Okay. It's perfect because I got in my communities, I got a lot of small businesses with crazy, dope, innovative ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone know for us securing a government contract forward through an unsolicited proposal, but more of going through this route would be more probably promising to get the funding and infrastructure they need to build the actual idea, then sell to the government agency. So I thought this was a great episode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I realizing too, we have, so, as I said, SBA, we try to convene our, the ecosystem builders, right? And so I consider you guys, you are ecosystem builders. And so definitely if I can sign you up for our monthly call, that's where we kind of deliver a lot of information that comes from the different agencies, what's going on, what's new. So
definitely. I think I got the invite the other day and I signed up. So I'll share it with Hamza and Chrisley as well. Because I was on it the last time and that's how I got connected with you.
Oh, great.
So then she ended up leaving. So I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
Brittany.
well, Brittany. So yeah, we need we need someone else to come in and talk about this. So I appreciate it. And I'm going to let you both get back to the rest of your day. Thank you again. And
when can we expect to see the link to the podcast?
Oh, I can drop the link right now, but I can also send it to you in an email. But for the links for the actual audio of the podcast, they'll be out possibly tomorrow. So Hannah, the podcast manager, she usually downloads it because I forget to record from my computer, but she'll usually download it from YouTube and then she'll upload it to the different streaming platforms. So I can send you the one right now for YouTube.
Or you can send us everything all together tomorrow if that's,
okay,
if that's easier for you. That works for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good day. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hamza.
Yes.
How you doing? I'm so hot.
How you like it? That was real informative. I like
that. I had heard about the program, but when you do the research on it, it seemed like so much more. Like, the government got so much information on the website. So when she started talking about it,
that's a whole nother avenue, lane, rabbit hole is that program right there. And that's getting funding. So it's not something that you're bidding for. It's something you get funding. And they spend the $4 billion minimum.
Listen, when that lady said non-dilutive, I was like, what? You ain't got paid. Yeah.
It's like free money. You don't have, there's no equity, there's no loan, there's anything. It's like, this is the money that you need. We like the proof of concept. Here's the money now, build it out, then come back and sell it to us.
Facts. Come back and sell it to me.
Right. So that's the important of like how our government is set up to empower small businesses, because that's what keep this economy going is a small business.
Yeah.
So when you talk about resources, and then it's easier for a naked new business to generate money through government contracting.
Yeah.
Then would just be startup just in the private sector. It's like public sector business transactions. It's like here's all the points.
Oh Lord, hold on, Hamza. How are we still live on YouTube?
But they didn't get it.
I'm weak. Oh my God, yo. Dang, look at us.
I need to remind you every time. Hey, are we done off of YouTube?
Hold on, because my mouse froze. That's what happened, and that's why I had to tap on it. I'm gonna call you on the phone because I think that's the only way I'm gonna have to do this. Okay, I ended it. Wow, and it's so funny. People were Hannah